What with all the attention being paid to Michael Flynn flipping on Trump, the Republican tax plan, and the increasing likelihood that the people of Alabama are about to knowingly elect a child predator to the United States Senate, the looming end of net neutrality has been mostly pushed to the back burner. And given the magnitude of those other stories, that's certainly understandable. But with the FCC set to vote to end net neutrality in the United States in less than 2 weeks, I wanted to at least spend a few minutes here discussing why net neutrality is important and what the internet is likely to look like in my country once net neutrality is gone. Simply put, net neutrality prohibits internet service providers from discriminating between content delivered from different sources. If I pay a monthly fee to, say, Comcast to access the internet, I can use that internet access however I want. I can watch streaming videos, I can visit websites, I can interact with people on social networks, I can check my email, whatever I want. And all of that content is delivered to me in exactly the same way, regardless of the source. Without net neutrality, service providers will be able to treat content from different sources in different ways. Last month, Ro Khanna, a Democratic member of Congress from California, tweeted this graphic, which contrasts the internet as it works now with the internet as it might work after net neutrality is overturned. Instead of paying your service provider for access to the entire internet, you could be forced to purchase individual packages to access particular types of content. For example, if a service provider notices that a large percentage of traffic on its network is due to people watching videos on Netflix, it might decide to charge customers extra to be able to access streaming video services like Netflix. In that scenario, customers who want to watch Netflix would be essentially forced to pay for it twice. You send one payment to Netflix to access their service, and then you send another payment to your service provider so that you can access the service that you just bought through Netflix. Or the service provider might decide to charge Netflix itself a higher fee in order to distribute its content through its network, and such charges would almost certainly be passed along to Netflix subscribers. Or Netflix, being the most successful company in its field at the moment, might decide that it wants to protect its spot as the #1 video streaming service by offering to pay the service providers extra in exchange for preferential treatment, which would make it even more difficult than it already is for other video streaming services to compete with Netflix. And of course, any additional costs related to that would eventually be passed on to the consumer, the Netflix subscriber. That's just a hypothetical example. Netflix actually supports net neutrality, by the way, and so does Google, and so does Amazon. In fact, so does pretty much everyone except those who represent the interests of the major telecommunications companies and right-wing free market fetishists. More on them in a second. The Netflix example is an illustration of just one relatively benign way in which things could be different. The broader consequences of doing away with net neutrality could be far more serious than people having to pay a bit extra to stream movies or play video games. Ending net neutrality will almost certainly make accessing the internet more expensive, which will also make it less accessible to people living on low incomes. That lack of connectivity for low-income people is already a problem. The end of net neutrality will only make that problem worse. So if ending net neutrality is such an obviously terrible idea, why does anyone want to do it? That's probably the easiest question to answer about this topic. Net neutrality is a form of government regulation. It's the government telling private companies how they can and cannot conduct their business. And private companies hate that. Private companies, first and foremost, just want to make money. And they can get pretty grouchy when the government steps in and stops them from doing something that they were hoping was going to make them a bunch of money. And this attitude is understandable, if not excusable. The United States is a proudly capitalist society. We Americans are taught from a young age to equate liberty with the ability to make money. starting your own business, becoming a financial success. These are the tangible realizations of the American dream. And why should the FCC want to stop telecommunications companies from becoming successful? Why does the government want to stomp all over AT&T's American dream? The problem is that unregulated markets lead to inequity and exploitation. Inequity and exploitation exist in regulated markets too. There's really no way in a profit-driven system to completely eliminate those conditions, but we can take steps to reduce them significantly. We can never completely stop all companies from trying to screw over their customers, but we can make screwing over their customers a lot more difficult to do and get away with. And outside the context of government-imposed regulation, private companies will inevitably screw over their customers. Why? Because their top priority isn't doing right by their customers, it's making money. And when a company's product is something that everybody wants and an ever-increasing portion of the population positively needs, like high-speed internet access, the incentive for the company to go out of its way to treat its customers fairly essentially vanishes. Net neutrality forces service providers to keep the internet open and free. Not really free, I mean, you have to pay to access it, but free in the same sense that the services in an all-inclusive resort are free once you've paid to get in. Ending net neutrality, deregulating the internet in that way, will be bad for everyone except those who make money from selling access to the internet. And it will represent the federal government abandoning its responsibility to protect the rights of consumers. Those who favor ending net neutrality claim that deregulating the internet will allow companies to innovate in ways that they just aren't able to now. But who are these people kidding? The end of net neutrality won't inspire telecommunications companies to find newer, better, less expensive ways to serve the needs of their customers. If past skirmishes between the FCC and major telecommunications firms are any indication, they won't use their newfound freedom to innovate. They'll use it to profiteer. I'm not a regulatory absolutist, mind you. I'm perfectly willing to entertain the suggestion that certain regulations may in fact be onerous, that there might be particular cases where the government would be better served to take a more hands-off approach. But I do support government regulation in general, because the government is the only institution in our society with the power to force private profit-seeking companies to put people ahead of profits. And while we may be better off without some particular regulations, let's not forget that the reason most regulations exist in the first place is because they were found to be necessary. Supporters of net neutrality don't want to stop telecommunications companies from making money. Hell, most of us are some shade or another of capitalist too. What we want is to preserve an open and free internet. And yes, we do think that's more important than maximizing the profits of AT&T and Comcast. Now, the FCC's vote on the new policy, which will abolish net neutrality, is set for December 14. There are 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats on the FCC, which means that the new policy is almost certain to pass. But who knows? It's not too late. Public pressure has been effective in thwarting several potentially disastrous pieces of legislation this year, so let's not give up while there's still a chance, however slim, for us to turn this around. Contact the FCC. Tell them you oppose this new policy. And while you're at it, contact your members of Congress and your senators and tell them the same thing. Tell them you support net neutrality and you expect them to support it too and to fight for it. Net neutrality is good policy because a free and open internet is best for everyone. And if we are going to have to lose it soon, let's at least go down swinging. Hey folks, hope you got something out of this one. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching.